Well, good afternoon. Looking at the reflection in the door, I think that's all the amount of people we're going to see. But I'm very grateful to see quite a good turnout for a session at the end of TechEds. So my name's Simon Skinner. I'm a Microsoft MVP. Today we're going to be talking about best practices of virtualizing and managing Microsoft SharePoint, particularly 2013, with Microsoft System Center and Windows Server. Also, I just want to quickly plug, I've created a new forum with Microsoft in the UK called Cloud OS Computing, kind of a novel name. So if you guys want to get part of this new community, that would be a great time to start as we launched it this week. So just to pick up an agenda for today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the whole process. We're going to go through the planning of our virtualization. We're going to go through the deployment process of how we could deploy our SharePoint environment, our SharePoint farms. We're also going to go through monitoring, because now we've deployed it, we want to see how it's running, if we're a service provider, make sure that we're meeting our SLAs, etc. So we're going to look at that process. We're also going to look through the process of protection. So, for example, antivirus or backing it up, for example. So we're going to go through that. So, and then we're going to come to a conclusion at the end where we can overlook exactly how we manage it with System Center and Windows Server. And if my clicker works. Okay, so we'll just get a quick audience poll, so you can put your hands up. It would be good for me to know where exactly you lie in the SharePoint farm. So have we got any SharePoint developers? Okay. Oh, did you forget you were a SharePoint? Yeah, you did, yeah. Any hosters of SharePoint? All right, cool. That's kind of a beginning to be more of a growing business now, I see. How many are using System Center already for administering 2013? Okay, fine. None of the above, but you've got a bit of an interest. All righty. And you've got challenges and you're looking for solutions. That's probably the... Or, in fact, you're just in the wrong session, because now would be a good time to say. Okay, so I'm going to just have a little caveat about what we're not going to talk about in this session, yeah? So we're not going to talk about VMware. We're not really going to talk about the best practices of Hyper-V, although I do have one line in there that is a guideline. And we're not really going to talk about Hyper-V clustering and the networking side. So in the planning phase, what can we virtualize? This is a question we hear all the time, especially on the Microsoft stands. People are saying, what exactly can we virtualize? Because over the last couple of years, this seems to have changed. People were like, well, we have Hyper-V, so we can virtualize X, Y, Z, like the front-end servers would be a no-brainer, for example. But what about the search or servers or the SQL servers, for example? So how many guys are actually now virtualizing SQL? And how many of you have still got it on physical boxes? Okay. Is there any reason for that? Does anyone want to give me a reason why they're still on physical? Because, yeah, I know, they really are something. I am actually scared of two people, SQL engineers and my girlfriend's mother. But now it's totally a supported aspect. And we're going to look into that in a bit more detail as we go along. So really, any part of SQL and ADS, so Active Directory, which is an interesting thing because now we can virtualize Active Directory, so that's like virtualizing our domain controllers. So we can do this if we're running on Hyper-V with Windows 2012 Server, because the Hyper-V is not dependent on Kerberos. So in fact, you can have your domain controllers booting up from nothing. Previously, you would have been in a very, very bad place. However, when we're virtualizing, now, we're going to see some stats a bit later on, but does size matter? Yeah, it surely does. We still need to give that thought process. We still need to work out exactly what kind of power we need to run our SharePoint farm. But we can firmly establish that we can run any part of our SharePoint farm as a virtualized environment. So just want to get a clear, simple message coming up in the next 2 slides. I want to clear a couple of things up that I hear quite a lot, and we can take this as granted. So first of all, the general, and this is my word, V supportability for SQL Server. It's supported on Windows 2008 SP2 with Hyper-V SP2. So we're running the core of Hyper-V here, for example. Windows Server 28. R2 and R2 Service Pack 1, and then obviously Windows 2012 Server, or any application that supports the server virtualization, so SVVP, so for example, those other people, whatever, and Windows Azure. So how many of you guys are actually running SharePoint in Azure? Any dev environments in Azure? Okay, and how's that working out for you, for example? Not bad, huh? We got that remark. But the guest OS for where you run your application, because of the dependencies around SQL Server, it's got to be 2008 SP2. I don't actually know so many people using that now. I think maybe on 64-bit we come across some stuff now, but AX86 seems to be finished now. But R2 and obviously Windows 2012. So how many people have actually sort of deployed 2012 as their core server? And who's still on R2? That's the majority. So is that a process because you're going to have to upgrade, or is that just because you haven't fully tested 2012 yet? Upgrade? Okay, cool. So all aspects of SQL Server 2012 are supported. All aspects. There is no part of SQL 2012 that you cannot virtualize. So this makes things a bit easier now because we have always on. So clustering is, becoming a thing of the past now. So let's have a look at the V supportability guide for SharePoint. Again, it's going to be the same base for our Hyper-V, exactly the same as it is by SharePoint. But it's got to be R2 or 2012 because of it's got to be 64-bit, for example, and there's some additional features that are not available in 2008, Service Pack 2. So again, all SharePoint 2013 is supported in a virtualized environment. So let's have a look at the performance of our SQL servers. So first, with the Windows 2012 Hyper-V strategy, the workloads are now supported. It's way more extensible. It's way more easy to accomplish with the CPUs, etc., because it's all aspects can be virtualized. So if we look at the graphs here, for example, we can see that if you've got a 64 gig box, then basically you're going to be able to put any kind of workload on that. So we have 6 times the performance increase with 5% improvement in the transaction time. Oh, we've got some more people coming as well. That's fantastic. So with these figures, customers can have the confidence that Hyper-V can be used to virtualize even the largest of SQL Server farms. For all our databases, with the SRIOV, virtual fiber channels, virtual Numera, for example, to ensure that the Hyper-V drives offer the highest levels of performance for the key load. So SQL is the crux. It's the foundations. I'm just waiting for the, yeah, you got the photo? Yeah, okay. I didn't want to flick past that one. So let's have a look at with the SharePoint. Again, it's the same. Because of the scalability of Hyper-V now, we're able to take the full flexibility for the SharePoint workloads. And again, based on an 8 CPU, 128 gig of RAM, any size SharePoint farm can be supported within Hyper-V. So here's a quick question about Hyper-V. How many people have made the transition from, I know I wasn't going to say this, but from VMware to Hyper-V? And how many people are thinking about making that move? Okay, so here's the question I'm interested in. How many people are doing that because of the technology or because they've inherited all the licensing? So put your hands up if it's a licensing thing and a technology thing. Can you have both? Okay. So Hyper-V has come a long, long, long way now. It's a great platform for running, as I say, pretty much anything virtualized now. So some more charts about the virtualization of SharePoint. So Microsoft have tested some of the largest possible environments they could create. They didn't find any performance degrade than they did on a physical, but what we do see is we see a greater amount of uptime. Potentially this is because when we have our front-end servers, we can have those on to load balancing servers and we can move them around with Hyper-V live migration, etc. So it becomes a much easier thing to manage than when it's on physical servers. If you're in a hosting environment and you're offering a client 99% uptime, that's going to be a challenge on a physical server. So the key virtual hardware considerations, and this is a kind of a key factor for SharePoint, is we use a one-to-one on the processors. We can do a two-to-one. So when you allocate your VM and you have your box up to 64 gig with all of the supported processors, for example, you're just taking one processor per VM. And this is kind of an important aspect. So we don't overkill those processors. I mean, in my dev environment, for example, I work on something like a 22-to-1, which clearly doesn't work that well. Dynamic memory. So for SharePoint, not really recommended, not supported to use dynamic memory. But how many people are actually using dynamic memory on their SharePoint virtualization? But it is in SQL. It's all down to the code. It's what's written inside the actual application itself that it can deal with the dynamic memory, it can deal with the changes, because Hyper-V is going to take control of that memory. So also we have synthetic NICs, guest teaming, etc., which makes everything a little bit more fault tolerant. Fixed drives up to 64 terabytes now. Still no snapshots, but we don't really want to do that. There are alternatives to using snapshots, although I believe there's been some sort of announcement around that this week with R2. And fiber channels and guest iSCSI now. So some pretty significant advances on what we can use for our hardware, for our storage. Host storage, DAS, SMB, fiber channels, iSCSI, SAS and SSD. So, for example, we would use SSD for our SQL logs, just to speed that whole process up. And for our SharePoint farm resiliency, we can have multiple nodes, centralized storage, up to 64 physical nodes and 8,000 virtualized machines per cluster. So this is where that licensing issue comes in, because if you have like an EA agreement or something and you're buying that per server, then you're in a great place when supporting around System Center and the licensing model. So with your SharePoint farm, Microsoft fully supports all components of highly virtualized SharePoint farms, including SQL applications, front-end web servers, MAC address spoofing, and software network load balancing. So does anyone here on their network load balancing, for example, use the centralized configuration for their IIS? So you write it to one server and it will automatically keep the same configuration? Good. Includes the ability for live migration on your 2013 servers. Kind of live migration is a great feature. First of all, we used to see at the early stages when we used to go into clients that they would have one physical machine with one virtual machine on it, just so they could get to understand how it worked, how the technology worked. But then people realized that they could just like move it off one machine, so you can retire hardware, you can open up hardware and do any kind of maintenance. But we are also seeing some clever thought processes around this, where people have multiple clusters in their businesses, and then at the weekends, in fact, they shut down some of those clusters. They shut down some of those nodes. They then migrate the VMs onto another physical node, and they can physically shut machines down because no one's using them at the weekend, or it's a limited amount of people using them in the weekend, so they can actually save on power. Cluster-aware updating. It's obviously indigenous to Windows 2012, but it's also a key factor now if we're using clustering, for example, so we can at least to ensure that the patches are going on correctly. Also to continuous availability for mission-critical SharePoint 2013. How many of you guys are offering SLAs above 98%? You're the brave one. So best practices, guys, for the virtualization of the two products. First of all, leave an adequate memory for your Hyper-V partitions. We recommend 4 gig or more. Obviously, that's the base minimum. We want to go a lot higher than that for your host computer operations. Don't use the parent partition for services other than Hyper-V. So in other words, don't have your swap files or your paging files or anything on those drives. Don't store computer systems, etc., on your Hyper-V storage. And use a minimum of 2 NICs. So how many people are using 1 NIC on their virtualized farms? 2? Okay. My personal recommendation is we use 3. I want to have one for management, I want to have one for my VMs, and I want to have one for my live migration. So whatever I'm performing in my Hyper-V, I can use a separate NIC for that traffic. Because I don't want to do a live migration, for example, and I have that detrimental effect on my networking by using the same NIC, because it's unnecessary. Most servers now come with quite a few additional NICs. Oh, that's the wrong in order. Again, going back to the 1-to-1 and the 2-to-1, don't oversubscribe on. Don't oversubscribe on your CPU for your virtualized computers. Don't cross the Numura. Get some bad effects on that. Don't use snapshots in product environment. Snapshots are okay for us to use if we're doing some dev stuff, or we want to just make a quick change in our demo environment or something, and we want to be able to roll back. But in production, we pretty much say that's a no-no. So configuring the Hyper-V host computer. Avoid using antivirus, for example, on the parent partition. So how many people run antivirus on SQL servers? Use hardware that supports second level or second level translation. Enable hyperthreading if the hardware supports it. I think technically today the majority does. I think even my laptop does these days. So now we've kind of gone through our planning process. We sort of know what our limits are, what we can use, how we're going to get the stuff onto the hardware from a planning point of view. But now we have to look at a deployment point of view. So I guess the first question is how many guys actually deploy SharePoint manually? And how many people are automating that? So, oh, here we go, it's all at work. Okay, so this is not an up-to-date PowerPoint. So we could do it manually, but it's a bit sort of old hat now. There's lots of mistakes that can be made because we're the human element. So if we do that multiple times, there's more chances that we're going to make mistakes. We could use System Center Configuration Manager, in fact, to roll out with lots of scripts that would go with that. We could use Virtual Machine Manager 2012. Anyone using Virtual Machine Manager to roll out SharePoint? Oh, cool. Orchestrator, who's using Scorch to do their SharePoint? Or you could get someone else to do it. It's always pretty good. So I really want to focus on the Virtual Machine Manager and how we can roll out SharePoint. So I think we've all come across the phrase from years ago, if you're going to do it twice, script it. That was always the general thing. So what this is a service template within Virtual Machine Manager. So who uses Virtual Machine Manager? We're all familiar with Virtual Machine Manager of what it does? Yeah? And anyone know anything about these service templates and how they work? Okay, so the short version is I can press a button and it will build me my SharePoint farm. I can literally press a button, go and make a cup of tea, come back. Granted, it's going to take you 4 or 5 days to initiate your first template. So what we can do is we can build out, first of all, so we have our SharePoint Enterprise, it's the heading. So then I've got my SharePoint SQL farm, because that's going to be the first element that I really need to deploy. I've missed out deploying of the operating system because, frankly, I don't care about deploying the operating system. There are so many ways that we can do that. We're bored of that subject. I want to just deploy an application. I take it for granted that that's going to roll out a server as well. So I want to get my SQL on there. So what I can do is I have a SQL script. I can say how many processes I want my virtual machine manager to allocate. So here, for example, 4 processors, and I'm going to have it on a 4 gig memory. But I could have that at 64 gig memory if I wanted, whatever your configuration was. This is just what I did in my lab to roll it out. So the first process it will do is it will deploy my SQL server. Has anyone ever seen, or we've all deployed SQL Server manually, yeah? And has anyone seen that you can actually build your own scripts within that deployment wizard? Yeah, so if you look at the bottom, you'll see advanced deployment. So you just run through that wizard and it will generate some scripts for you that we can use into this deployment for our SQL Server. So then I need to get out on my app tier, for example. So I actually need to be able to get out the SharePoint Foundation server, etc. So that's not going to be so easy because we've got to cut a lot of AD accounts for that, for example. Because generally speaking, we can get SharePoint out with AD accounts if we want, or we can use a local service or etc. Kind of depends on how your DBAs want to go about that. So we can run inside this another script which will run some PowerShell against our Active Directory servers, and it will go off and create all the accounts that we need that we've already pre-configured inside our scripts. So it just eliminates for us to actually have to go and create any kind of for accounts. We need to be able to build our network. So we've got our networking here, for example, so it's already configured. So each time each server builds, it's going to add a NIC, it's going to add it into the network. And then finally, I want to get my web front-end servers on. But I may want to have multiple. At the moment, in this template, I'm only running 3, just to give you an example how we can deploy the SQL, the SharePoint, the foundation services, and then we can roll out our web front-end services. But I could deploy those again with some smart logic. So I say that they're going onto my Hyper-V server, and they're going to be network load balanced, etc. And I can configure them exactly how I want them. The good thing about this is once I've got my template done, once I've got my template finished, then what I can actually do is just rerun that time and time again. It's going to take the same scripts. It's going to take the same configuration, and if you got it right the first time round, it's going to be right the second, the third, and the fourth. Just as a sort of a sidetrack, I've been working with some people, and over time, if you tell them to manually do something, it changes because they find a shortcut. I was in a hospital just recently, and I came across this robot that came out of an elevator and was delivering some sort of green bucket, big like a dustbin you would have outside your house. And it followed, you could see the tyre tracks followed exactly the same. So I stood there and waited for another one, and out it came out of the lift, which actually took quite a long time, about 40 minutes for another one to arrive, and it followed the exact same tracks. So I waited for another one. An hour later, another one turns up, and it took the same tracks. And I was thinking, had I asked someone to do that manually, those tracks would be all over the place. They wouldn't do it in any kind of organised fashion. They would do it on the way they thought at the time. I don't actually want to take that risk in my data center. I want to test something, I want to know it works, and I want to make sure it gets deployed exactly the same way every time because I know it works. So these templates, you can get some examples of the Microsoft site, for example, but these are pretty well documented now. There's quite a lot of configuration that goes on behind. I did have a demo, and I bottled out at the last moment because the connection's not been brilliant. But these are very, very well documented on the internet on building these templates, especially from some of the Microsoft guys, direct from the VM Virtual Machine Manager team. So you won't have any prior problems following it through, and there is some pretty good documentation on this as well. But this is the way forward for rolling out our SharePoint sites. So then what about automating the accelerated deployment? So now what I want to do is, instead of having to go to my virtual machine manager and pressing a button and then getting that to fire off, especially if I've got someone else to do that. Now, I put in my slide earlier on that you could get someone else to do it, and I wasn't trying to make a funny remark. What I was trying to do is you can actually now outsource this to someone who wants to buy into this service, that wants to deploy this service, but you can say, this is the configuration, this is tried and tested, we've gone through the management approval or whatever. I don't really want to take a phone call to my IT department because that's what they want to deploy. I just want to let them be able to deploy that themselves. I'm in control. I wrote the scripts. I know where it's going. I don't need to talk to them. I can just say, you need to do that, and you've got the rights and the permissions, and I can run that. So let's have a quick look of how we can do that. So, for example, we have an app owner, because they own the application, right through to for the data center admin. Well, I know quite a few data center admins, and largely they're just too busy to even communicate with people, and especially when they're actually in data centers, sometimes it's not the easiest place to communicate. And then with my app owner, they have a completely different logic to what's going on. By writing our scripts, we've already had that conversation. We've already got that finalized. So we could do it for a self-service, for example, within Service Manager, or we could do it through App Controller if we wanted to. Service Manager will be a good place to start. We can feed that through to Orchestrator. Anyone using Orchestrator? Has anyone started playing around with it? Has anyone worked out the fact that if you can't do it, you can do it in Orchestrator? Because it's like a glue. It's whatever you can't get to work out of a normal application, pretty much you can be sure that you're going to be able to automate that in Orchestrator. Just another little kind of story. We did some work for a council, and we were going through this process. They wanted to deploy workstations for employees that came along. We sat down, we listened to their whole process, and in fact, we got HR department to deploy workstations. Because we built on an interface on Orchestrator, they needed some details. They needed the guy's name or the lady's name, whoever. They needed their address and some details, and we thought, actually, we could use that. They know what department they're in, they know what they're going to be doing, they probably know what kind of applications and programs they need to run. So I'm going to take the information at source, so when the HR lady, is that sexist? They typically are ladies, aren't they? But when the HR person filled out all that information without actually actively knowing about it, they've gone through Orchestrator, they're going to build an AD account, added them into Exchange, and they can actually allocate them a computer and applications, and potentially you could roll out an OS on that, all through Orchestrator, all through the source. One thing I like about that is, generally speaking, that person in HR is very meticulous and is going to make sure all the details get down and are completely accurate. So when Bob joins the company, by the time he gets to the Exchange admin, he hasn't turned into Jane. So in our runbooks at the bottom, for example, it's like a logical process like Visio. As you would draw out your Visio workflow, each container will have a certain aspect that it goes and accomplishes. And then you can add some error logging into that, for example. So something didn't work. It couldn't connect to whatever, maybe DNS, or there was a problem. So it could then raise an alert to say it didn't get past this stage, or whatever the problem was. So then we can get into our configure deploy. So via the Service Manager, we can then deploy that template that goes and rolls out our SharePoint farm. And then we can put that wherever that is, public cloud, private cloud, physical or virtual. And then after that, it just rolls into the data center administrator to just meet on the SLAs. So did anyone know that this was possible to do with SharePoint? So we can have a basically light touch deployment of the whole environment? And how many people are reasonably excited about that? So VM from template, runbook from Scorch, which is Orchestrator, deploy from Service Manager, hosting ready, client deployable. We're ready to move on to the monitoring phase. So any questions on that? Okay. So we've now done our planning. We've now worked out our template that we can use time and time again. And if there's a change, that's okay. We can just break into the template, make a change. It's not a problem. But now we have a automated deployment of our application. Now we've got our application and running. Now comes the problems. We need to maintain that. We need to keep that live. We need to keep our SLAs going and our clients happy. So what does SharePoint 2013 Management Pack monitor for SharePoint 2013? Let's have a look at some of the things that we actually need to monitor. So, for example, we have the SharePoint server itself, the SharePoint Foundation server, 2013, it should be there. So we have the 2013 server. We might have Project server in there. Is anyone using Project now? Pretty cool stuff, huh? We recently did a deployment where for some .NET developers where they took Visual Studio, they were writing their code, they were feeding that back into Operations Manager for APM, for example. That went back into the TFS system. We filtered it into SharePoint, then back to Project to see if they met their timelines. You can automate that process, just as a thought. But we've got access services, business connectivity, security token services, managed web, education services, Excel, info, path, performance point, translation services, and some over there. Sandbox, secure services, SharePoint. There's a few applications that we need to, a few components we need to monitor within our SharePoint site, down to Visio service. So there's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot we need to do. We don't want to do this manually. And Word automation service. So let's have a look at this in detail. So is anyone out using the SharePoint Management Pack in Operations Manager today? And how many of you found it intuitive to install? There will be no hands raised there at all. Okay. And how many of you guys found that because of lack of documentation, or you just... Yeah. Okay. So first of all, you've got to do it in a certain order. All right, the foundation has to be done first. So if you do this manually, you've got to make sure the foundation server is the first one that's installed. If you do it via the select management packs for importing the management packs, it will take care of that itself. It will deal with that. So you can either download it via the Microsoft channels, or you can go to the website and download it yourself. But as long as the foundation goes on first. Now, if it needs to do an upgrade, it will take care of the upgrade for you. What we need to do is we need to just make a copy of the Excel file, because we're going to make some changes from 2010 to 2013. There's some information that we may want to save in there. So make sure the run as accounts are configured correctly. Anyone have problems with, particularly around the run as accounts? No, that was pretty straightforward. Ensure that you have a list of your SharePoint servers. So what does that mean? It means any server that's running the SharePoint component has got to be in the list. Any SharePoint server has got to be in the list. Also, we need to allow for about an hour, maybe longer for larger environments, for our management pack to actually be able to discover everything. But if I want to make changes to that, I can actually break into the XML. This is also fairly well documented on the internet, so I can change those discovery times. I can make it longer because I have a busy environment and I don't want all this discovery going on, or I can make it shorter periods of time. But I'm in control of that. So then when we configure our SharePoint Management Pack, and now in 2013 we have a great facility where we can do a debug, so we can see what didn't work for us, for example, where we did have problems, we can run that in a debug, and that will help us out greatly. So if it goes through to success, we're going to get a pop-up like this. We'll say that it's configured successfully, and we're kind of ready to go. So we run straight to our management pack, and we have a look inside that, and we don't see anything there. And it's going to take some time. It takes some time to come through. We just kind of need to be patient on that one. So does anyone use DAs, distributed applications? So I believe that this is a must if you are running any kind of SharePoint site or any kind of application. This is a must that we need to run. First of all, I can just eliminate what's good and focus on what's not good. One of the key features here is if you take a clock, for example, 60 minutes on a clock, typically in IT it takes us 50 minutes to find a problem. Then we've got 10 minutes to fix it. Then after that, everyone's getting angry. I could look at this, open it up. Within 10 seconds, I know roughly where the problem is. Within 15 seconds, I've got pretty good info of what's going on. Within 10 minutes, I'm in complete control of my situation. I know what my problem is. Now I've got 50 minutes to fix it. So that means I could potentially have time to document, but I could make a smarter fix just because I can look here and I can see where my crosses are. I can see where my problems are. It's going to take me to my root cause. Well, let's suppose if we, for example, extended this, and I made this D8, this is the standard one we're going to get in SharePoint, but I extended this to my routers, to my switches, to my DNS, to my Active Directory, down to my SQL servers, down to my physical hardware. And then I had one DA for that, so I can open it up and I can say, I have a problem with performance, so I'm going to go straight to my web servers. But I may actually want to be going to the fact that one of my hard drives is failing. Don't waste your time. Use these tools because these will save you time and you'll be able to make a much more accurate fix. I used to work with this guy, his name was Jared Barr, and he would say there's a problem, and he was within 10 milliseconds banging on the keyboard. I'm like, what are you doing? You're doing things without any kind of intel. You don't know what's going on. Do we want to troll through event logs? Personally, I don't. I want to open up this, and I want to know what's going on. And I want time to think about what I'm going to do, and I think about how it's going to impact my environment. I was watching a documentary just recently about airline pilots, and on the long-haul flights, they actually get them to make regular checks on the just to go through things from point to point to point, not necessarily because they want the aeroplane, they're going to make a difference to make the aeroplane safe, but it was actually more around the principles. They wanted them to think. They wanted to keep their in control of what was going on, and this is exactly what it does. It allows you time to think, not panic. The cool thing is that we could be pretty proactive about this. So, for example, I could have a hard drive failing, and it could tell me about it maybe 4 or 5 days before it fails. I could have an outage on a backup power supply on my hardware, or I could just have the start of an alert going on that hasn't created to a full-blown error yet, and I know what's going on. I've got some time to deal with that. That's a much better place for me to be in. I really don't like surprises. So how many of you guys are using the SPHA, the health analyzer that you have within SharePoint? Because from 2010 onwards, we've got this health analyzer. So how many people are using that? And do you finding that useful? So what are you using? ULS? Yeah, we're using ULS. And how does that work out for you? So like you just turn ULS on, but not onto verbose, for example. And then when you really need to know something, you just turn it onto verbose. So then you go away from your monitoring and, for example, you go and have a look at those log files in the Hive. Okay. So how does that work out if you're going to do it across multiple servers? Yeah. Funny enough, I don't like that idea. Okay, well, the good thing with the health analyzer is what we've got in SharePoint in our health analyzer is completely reflective to what we've got in Operations Manager. So if I write a rule in SharePoint, it will automatically create in my Operations Manager file. So for my monitoring, it's that whatever changes are made, completely transparent, it's just going to appear in Operations Manager, and it happens pretty quickly. So here's a quick thing about the diagnostics logging. We're going to go into this in a bit of a deeper dive, actually, because this was the one thing that kind of annoyed me. You've got all this wealth of information, and it's kind of on a per-server basis. So with System Center, I'm going to get the whole picture across all of my environment. So, for example, enhanced monitoring. Now with the modifications that they've made in monitoring within 2012, when I look at my health Explorer, it's only going to tell me what is wrong currently. Because there's little point about knowing what's right, what's good. I don't care about that. I just want to know what's going wrong. So it rolls up and it will just show us. So then I can go and have a look at those errors. So I can see that the error was good, it was bad, it was good, it was good, it was bad, it was good, it was bad, and I got a bit of a history of what's going on. This is something we lack in SharePoint. So, for example, I can see in the... that doesn't work. Okay, so in the middle pane there, you can see the state configuration change. There's 3 there. I can see the change state. I can see what times. And underneath, I can see more in depth about that information. So out of the health analyzer, it will just tell me I've got a performance issue or whatever. But by using Operations Manager, I could filter it down, for example, and then go to my hardware and I say I've got a hardware failure. I've got a processor on the way out. I've got RAM. I'm in control. I know what's going on with my environment now. So, as I say, we were going to do this demo, and with the way the internet was, I kind of decided not to do that. So, let's have a look at this, the way that we can get these ULS files into Operations Manager. So, I've just taken a couple of screen dumps here this morning. So, first of all, what we want to do is be able to create an alert. Now, this is going to be an alert from a log file, because the ULS reports to a log file, okay? So I want to make sure I don't pick up any other log files. I want to tie it down to just my SharePoint, for example. So I've pinned it down to the target rule there is for my SharePoint 2013 servers, because in this rule, if I had any 2010 servers, I don't want to mix it up. I want to keep this down to my 2013. Yeah. So then what I've done is I've put in the string for where the hive is, for where the log is in the hive. Obviously, that won't exist until the first time you turn on the logging, but then after that, that file's going to be there. Now, the thing is that log file can get pretty big. So I don't really want to go trolling through the whole of that log file either. I don't want to have to read the whole of that log file, because that, to me, would also not be an effective way. Now, I could write a pattern in. So, for example, I could put an asterisk or a question mark in, so then it will read any log file that's in that string. There are other log files in there. So I could put in, like, for example, I've got in a particular name for a server here, but I could have it for a common string that would just pick out exactly the servers that I wanted to get the info on. No need to put it onto any different type of encoding. We just use the standard coding. Now, this is the important part. The string, and I'll put this on a blog because I was going to do this as a demo, as I explained, but I've got here params/param1. Now, this is a very significant thing, because all I'm doing is I'm telling Operations Manager to read the first line of the log file. So it will constantly check the first line of the log file, because to become the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth entry in that log file, at one point I had to be the first. So instead of going through the whole of the log file, I'm just saying, just stick to the top line. And that will save a lot of performance on the agent, for example. And then I can put in the value I want. So I put in high. So I'm looking for the high alerts. I'm interested in high alerts. Now, for me, this is kind of a significant point, because like when I use SharePoint, even when I've seen it maybe twice, 3 times on Office 365, you get a correlation ID and then it's got a big arrow saying back to the site. So we could have an error we never get picked up on, because users have got the ability to add their own features in, etc. But I kind of want to capture that information, I think. I want to know if I'm getting something on a regular basis. I don't really want to collect data just for the sake of it, so I'm going to put it as a high, or I could put it down as a warning. But all the informational stuff that goes on in those log files, I don't really care about that. I don't think I can make any effective changes. So in my Operations Manager environment, I'm minimizing what goes on in those ULS logs. Can I search it across multiple servers? Oh, yeah, I can. Oh, yeah. Because wherever there's an agent, it's going to look for that string. That's not one computer specific. It's across my whole farm. So now I've got my whole farm's ULS logs rolling up into Operations Manager, but then I've done it in a way that it's minimizing the amount of effort because it's only reading the first line. Does that make sense to people? That would be a better way of doing it. I like to call this, I've rebranded this now, intellectual laziness. I want to know what's going on, but I don't really want to go and find out either. I've got other things I need to do. You know, Facebook, Twitter. So pretty important stuff. So I need to write an expression in because what I want to do is I want to make my alert look correct. So when it appears in my Operations Manager console, I want to make it specific to what I'm doing. So for example, I can say a new SharePoint alert has been detected. And then I can write some log file directory. So it lays out all my error exactly the way I want. I can then say it's a priority high or a priority low, etc. So for example, if I did that as a warning, I would have that as a warning instead of like as a high alert. So it appears in the logs in the appropriate way. Thing is that I've now got another problem. As we discovered a little bit earlier on with ULS, it's going to create a lot of traffic. There's a lot of alerts. So do I really want my Operations Manager event console displaying all of these alerts? Actually, no, I don't. What I want to be able to do is take the information and I want to be able to put it away so it's not just filling up the center console for me for my main environment. So I just got a quick thing here I'm going to open up. So again, I'll put this as a blog post so you guys can pick up on it. See if I can get that a little bit bigger for you. But I wrote some PowerShell. So what I'm going to do now is every time I'm looking specifically for my SharePoint high or medium alert within my main console of Operations Manager, and every 5 minutes I'm going to move it into a folder specifically for my SharePoint alerts. And by running this, I can run this within Operations Manager myself. I could run it as a triggered event, for example, on my Windows server, run this PowerShell. But this will hook into the Operations Manager, look for those alerts. It will remove them. It will do some couple of clever things to it. And then it will make it appear somewhere else. I could further modify this, for example, so I could say that every 10 days, 5 days, or whatever, a month, however you feel you want to have it, that I could delete those alerts. Because I no longer really need them. But I don't want to go deleting all those alerts. I want to automate that process. You know, we're in the environment now of a hosting, and hosting to me just means making money in a way that you don't have to touch anything. Automate the whole process. So we're using PowerShell now to automate that process. So this script will take care of that for us. I'll post this on the internet. I can post it on my new forum. So let's go back into the PowerPoint. Which will do that. Just in case you forgot any bits, I'm just rerunning it for you. Right, so now I want to go move into the phase of protection. So I think what we've done here is we've done our planning. We've looked at our deployment. We've looked at our monitoring and how we can monitor it. And how we can also monitor it from the way we would do as if we were a SharePoint guy. We're using exactly the same tools. But really now what I need to do is I need to be able to protect my investment. DPM, is anyone using DPM? Okay. So this is another product in the System Center suite. You got the product. If you've got the EA licensing, you've already got it. One of the really cool things about DPM is I can back up my SQL databases on an every 15-minute basis. So when you've got all these random users using a SharePoint, we can't go around them all saying, can you just re-enter that information? That's ridiculous. But I want to back up those databases. I want to back them up so I can restore them very, very quickly. And using DPM is a very effective way of doing that. One, because you probably own it and it's free inside your licensing. Also because it's a pretty good program. So Data Protection Manager provides granular protection up to the latest versions, fully supports SQL Server 2012, always on SharePoint farms, Exchange as well. I put that in just in case. It also will add in Exchange. So DPM will take care of the protection. I could use Forefront, for example, for the antivirus, and I can incorporate that inside my SharePoint farms as well. Another tool run by System Center. Forefront's sort of pretty much part of the SCCM family now. So I kind of got it covered from all angles because it's a website. It's susceptible to viruses, etc. We need to be able to protect that. One of the good things is with DPM now is that I can store it locally and I can also offload it to Azure Backup. Now, Azure Backup is considered to be off-site, clearly. So I have a local backup, and then I can say that I want to ship that out off to the cloud, so I have an off-site. So if I need to do a restore locally, that's fine. I just use my local DPM server. I just do my restore. It's going to be pretty quick, pretty transparent, because it's only going to, it works on blocks, so it's only going to restore back the data needed. But I can also offset it and off to Azure to store my backup. So in the conclusion, well, that's never happened before. We're on time. All of my SharePoint servers can be virtualized with Windows Server Hyper-V. All of my SQL can be virtualized with Windows Server Hyper-V. All my SQL 2012 is best to date, especially with the always on. It's the best database to be using now for our SharePoint farms. SharePoint just happens to be a coincidence, also works best on Windows Server 2012 Hyper-V. So SharePoint and System Center, you're protected. With 2012, your SharePoint environment is fully protected. So it's Windows Server and System Center 2012. It's in the bag. We've got it sussed. So let's just, recap. We've gone through the whole process. Is there any aspect that anyone can think of that we've missed out for rolling out our deployment to getting our product online? Well, that's pretty good. Thank you. So we've got the resources. You've got the TechEd, TechNet rather, Channel 9, MSDN, learning, etc. I guess you've seen these slides already. Complete the evaluation form. So if you could do the evaluations on my session today, I would be very grateful. Feed my children, that kind of stuff is all down to you guys. And you got your tag, etc. So down to questions. Anyone got any questions? I'm going to walk down to you because there's no microphones, and I'll try and repeat what you're saying. Okay, that's a good question. So what you're saying is with Virtual Machine Manager, does it take care of my group policies? Is that your question? Okay, so actually, no, it doesn't. But it doesn't need to, because my Active Directory is going to deal with that with me. As soon as I join it to the domain with Orchestrator, I can ask it, or tell it rather. I'm going to tell it, I'm in command, which OU to go into. I can get that granular. So I can say, you've got to go into that OU, then it's going to take my policies. I don't want to do anything really. I want to roll these templates out, and I don't want to have to worry about any aspect of this. I want this to just roll out so I don't need to do anything, because I strive to be a very lazy person. Any other questions? Hi. Okay, so that is a good question. So often people are saying, well, if I do my backup to Azure, how long is it going to take me to do a restore? Well, in fact, what I'm doing is I'm sending my backup to Azure, so I have it off-site, but I also have it on-site. Yes, I could. Yeah, I could. So what I do is when I do the restore of my DPM, I'm then going to ask it to download the full backup from Azure, and I'll be able to restore from there. Any other questions?
Are you able to export these templates as well?
Can you export them to China?
No, if you create with the standards of your company, for example, consultancy company, can you create some standards as well, so that you can deliver it for maybe hundreds of customers?
Okay, so the question is, can I export the service templates because I want to take them on to a client? The answer is yes, you can. In fact, you basically import them. Where the extra challenges are is that you need to, those templates, you also need to configure like your networking, etc. Within your environment. So you can, but you're still going to need to do some manual work. But yeah. As I say, it's 3 or 4 or 5 days to get the template up and running, and then after that, you don't touch it again. But you could export it and just do the same process. Any other questions? Well, it sounds like we do have it in the bag. So I say thank you very much. I expect you're all rushing off to the airport now, because that's what I'm doing. All right, thank you.